Sorry if it took a long time, but I had some difficulty getting classroom assigned during the finance period. So I sent around by email, you should all have received it, a form in which you can express your preference for the final presentation. Okay? There are 2 time slots available on Thursday and 2 time slots available on Monday. So a presentation is usually 10 minutes plus questions. Usually, because they are variable length, but my experience is that we can fit 5 in an hour, roughly. So with 5 in an hour, this means that 30 presentations can be held during the finals day, Monday. And in case we don't have enough time, we can always use my lab afterwards, I guess. But there is time also on Thursday. There is the class time on Thursday, and they also reserved some time 2 to 4. Okay, so there is I hope, ample time. You have to judge whether you want to get rid of the presentation earlier on Thursday or whether you want to wait until Monday. Okay, and so those are the choices. And you can tell me when it's possible and when you would prefer to do it. Okay. So I think that's it for the presentation. So if you have special requirements, there is a note field in which you can write your preference. Okay. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that I wanted to remind you to give feedback on the evaluations you get for homework 3, because I want to compute the grades, and computing the grades takes into account this +2 to -2 feedback that you give one to the other. And so if you give it, that will be a good reward for the people who did the reviews. Okay. So these are, I think, the 2 announcements. Is there any other question on the logistics of the class?
So how is presentation?
It's a little bit up to you, but my advice is in general to have some slides, because you want to make sure that if disaster strikes, meaning your Android doesn't behave or something like that, you can still do something, right? So you should. I think a good structure is have some slides, just a few that tell me what the problem is, how your app works. You can use a few screenshots from the app to explain how it works, and to explain some internals, or some things that you did in the code, or other things that were interesting. Okay, so have a few slides like these, and then you can give the demo in the emulator, or else on the phone. What I wanted to ask, but then I didn't put it in the official message, is this. If you have the app ready by when you give the demo, even not the last version, you can tell me, but you can upload in QuadGrader the APK. Then people can download it and people can play with your app during the presentation. I don't know if there is enough time, but if you want to give people a demo in which people actually use the app, so you can also indicate when you give the presentation if you really would enjoy having more time. And if I have it, then I will accommodate it. Okay, if I can arrange people's presentations in the right ways, then if you really want to have a demo in which other people in the class use it, then that's great. So essentially, it's a little bit up to you how to best demo the app. Okay, because I mean every app is doing something different. So some can be demoed by just showing the screen. Others can be demoed by having you and your team members have multiple phones with the app installed and doing something together, something like that. Okay. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. So I wanted to give you one small clarification on services, actually, just to complete what I told you about how to create services and manage them. So in the tutorial I gave you, and not in the tutorial, but essentially in the code I gave you, I created a service, a background service. I wanted to specify that I created that service within the same process as the application. Okay? This means that if I draw essentially what's going on, there is, as I do many times, there is the application, then there is the service, and then there is the service thread. Okay, the service thread. And the service thread, if you look at the code I gave you, in onCreate, In onCreate, I created my thread equals to thread of this, essentially. Okay, so I created a thread in onCreate, and then I started, if it's not already started, in on resume or not in on resume, on start command. Sorry. Okay. The reason I do that is important. I discovered it because I was chasing some bug in my code, so I wanted to pass you the wisdom. The idea is that you have to create one thread only. It might seem natural to create a thread on start command because you may wonder, what do I do? You know, before I don't need it, my thread, so I might as well do it on start command. The drawback in doing that is that you may end up creating more than one thread, and then your service is executing multiple copies of itself. So that's a bad idea. Okay. But essentially, this works all in the same process, which means that when you want to talk to your service, you can very well do a call to the binder, which is just exposes the service itself, and the service itself can just call a method of the thread. Modulo synchronization, in which you avoid to, share the data structures in incompatible ways. That's all good. I wanted to tell you that there is another way to do things, which is a little bit more complicated, but is sometimes important. So in the manifest, you can say that Android process for your service is equal to, and then you can say something like my service. Okay, so this essentially tells Android to create a private process for your service in which the service will run. There is a beauty and a drawback. The beauty of it is that if your main activity dies, your service doesn't die. Okay? When Android does garbage, when Android sometimes kills processes, it kills whole processes. It does not kill individual threads, obviously. Okay? So there is some advantage. Now you may think, but my code is free of bugs. Why would I care about it? And again, this is something that I'm learning as I go as well. Okay, but it's not sufficient to be free of bugs in order not to be killed. Okay, there are many other reasons why your process might be killed at any time. Some reasons include the fact that the garbage there is too much. You're using too much memory. Even if you are not, I discovered that the garbage collector is very picky about when it tries to decide, the garbage collector in Java, by the way, is a very complicated thing because it's trying to do this garbage collection in real time, and it has to essentially follow all the links in the memory to decide whether somebody is holding yes or no a reference to a particular object. So it's a very, sophisticated piece of thing. And while the garbage collector is trying to do what it has to do, the data structures are changing because the program is also running, right? And so there is, I discovered some interaction between the network implementation and the garbage collector, such that if you do long-lasting network calls, sometimes the garbage collector complains that certain objects are being locked and modified for over 10 seconds. It's a classical bug on Stack Overflow. And so sometimes your process is killed because the garbage collector cannot do its job fast enough. Okay, I'm still grappling with these sort of things for myself. But what I want to tell you, oh, wow, fantastic! This is an abandoned power supply. Really handy. What I wanted to tell you is that unfortunately, Android is one of these things in which you can actually never be sure that if your code will continue running, even if it's correct. There are too many things, and there are too many things that are simply out of your control in order to ensure that. So having a service run in another process is it can be a good idea from that point of view. Okay, when one dies, the other one doesn't die immediately. Okay. Now, the drawback is this, that if you do this, you cannot anymore do the trick of returning the binder that is simply a reference to the process. Okay? What you need to do is, and I just give you the reference in case it sticks in your mind and for future implementation, is this. what you need to do is that you need to pass around the messenger objects. So the messenger has a way to get a, you essentially need to communicate between here and there using messages. Okay? So what you need, because you are in two separate processes, you cannot call methods. The only thing you can do is you can send messages. And so there is a messenger Java class that helps you to do that. Okay? You can listen, the way it works is this. I just describe it by voice, and then I can send you to the documentation if you want. But you know that every thread has a looper, right? The looper object of a thread is the thing that queues messages and runnables in order for them to be executed. So what you do is something like this. You create a looper, you build a messenger object around it, and you get the binder of the messenger and you return it to the application. Okay? I can point you to the documentation if it's needed, but that is how you do it. So essentially you send back a binder that contains a way to send messages to the process. Okay? And the process will have to also send back messages to the application. Okay, so essentially you have to build everything on top of a message passing paradigm. Okay? This gives you essentially full independence, and then you can do, you know, this can be much longer running, the service. It can be really something separate in the background that doesn't die when your foreground app dies, and that is, you can declare it, you can start it with a start sticky so that if it dies, the operating system will restart it. And that is essentially how you can build a, you know, a reliable backend for synchronizing information or doing things of that type. Okay, this is one clarification I wanted to give you. And then I was trying to think at what to do in this last class. And I was sort of thinking the following. If I tell you some new thing in Android, I'm not sure that at this point you care. Why? This is just how I view things, okay? But by now you have realized that Android is a set of central ideas plus a very large set of APIs that you can use. There are many APIs that I haven't reviewed. I haven't reviewed the one for maps. I haven't reviewed the one for camera. I haven't reviewed, you know, multiple others. But in a way, you know, at this point, I think you probably are able to read the documentation yourself from one of these APIs and get it to run, hopefully. And if I give you one more, it doesn't change the situation so much, just because there are so many. So, so I thought of trying to do something more amusing, since it's at least the last lecture, and we should take it. And I wanted to do this. So I want to first answer, or later answer any questions you may have on your projects. But then I thought of making this exercise, you know. Suppose we take some of the projects you're doing, and the best would be if some of you proposed their project, and we tried this exercise all together of seeing what it would take to take that project and make it into a real company. Not only, I mean, I can hint at, you know, what it takes also to do startup from the organizational point of view. I'm not a complete expert, but I know some of it. But I also wanted to essentially get us to think all around what goes into the product, right? Which is usually not only an Android app, but there is also a lot around it, including some ways to spread it, some ways to make it work together with our other applications, etc., etc. And I thought that this might be the most fun exercise, in a sense, in a non-technical exercise, but in a sense it also gives us the idea of all the pieces that might be involved if one really wanted to do it for serious. So is there any volunteer? Maybe we'll do it with a couple of apps, maybe with only one, we will see. But is there any volunteer that would like to propose their product or their app as what they want to develop? Okay? Sorry, can you say it again? Clock-in, clock-out system for companies. Okay, I see. So the company is a company that is, I don't know, the local UPS office. They want to clock in the employees that come and go, and they simply want to do it based on location on your phone.
Yeah. Well, no, the company is, that's kind of like their software. It would be a different clocking system than what's out there. And so it's like for somebody with like an hourly wage, they would like show up somewhere and then go to the Wi-Fi network. They would automatically check and then start paying them basically. And then once they leave, they'll clock them out automatically.
Okay, yeah, that's a very nice idea. No, but I understood correctly then. I mean, I was mentioning UPS, but maybe they're not paid by hours there, but they're paid by, I don't know, contractor sites or, I mean, construction sites, I guess, or I don't know, exactly. But I think many of these places are paid by hours. It's only that, so some of these places, I don't know, I never worked in this country by hour, I guess. I think that in many places where we work by hours, can you just work anytime you want, or do they tell you that they usually not, right? You have some slots in which you should work.
Yeah, you have slots, and then right now, for most companies, just go to a computer, press the button,
Right, but so there are two things essentially. You have the assigned slots, and then you have when the employee is actually present. But there are these two separate concepts, right? Because it's not only that you can go in and then start getting paid. And so one of the things, actually that's a very nice example. I haven't thought of all of these product spaces. So let's try to design it for fun to see the pieces that are involved. How would one do it? So conceptually, there is this piece of the hours that are that you want people to pay. So you need some interface in which people can enter, the employees, and which hours they're supposed to work. And there is probably some need for some options, such as, this is the minimum, but then they can work extra, and what is the rate for extra work, and what is the rate for basic work. I don't know how it works, right? But for example, I don't know if I tell you that you should work only these hours, whether you can actually work more and get paid more. I mean, but you would assume that there is some flexible way of doing that, right? So there needs to be some interface somewhere in which an employer can go in and do that. And that's a lot of information that you need to put in, because you need to put in the pay plans. So it's probably going to be a web app, my guess, because you're probably not, or at least, a web app, or it could actually work on tablets. And actually that might be important, because I see more and more tablets in use in places like restaurants. And I think that restaurants would be a prime user of that, because of how many there are, and because of how often people work by, specific days a week, but by hour, essentially. And they hardly have laptops in the restaurants, because tablets are so much. So okay, so fine, you could do it that way, but and so okay, so there is a first interface that is how to enter the hours. Okay, I don't know how to work, but like it's the employer essentially. It's where the employer goes. Okay, and then you need to decide exactly what to produce here. And I think the product number one would be sort of to build the web front end, because it's the most general and you capture the whole audience. Okay, and then I think that after some time, this might be one of the cases in which it pays to use not PhoneGap, but now is use Cordova, and actually create via Cordova. We could create fairly quickly clients for iOS and Android and Windows for if any. Okay. So what's the point in creating these local clients? So that I think that actually I think this would be essential to do. And the reason is the following. If I am an employer, I have to have some way, and we can talk about this in a moment, but we have to have some way of checking that you are at the place of work. Now, I know it because I try to help a company that also is trying to install webcams, and so it needs to know essentially what's going on a network. But it's incredibly difficult to ask people to enter any kind of detail on their location or on their network. Okay, I mean, people are just confused. They don't know how to type the SSID. They get it wrong far too often. Many people don't know what the SSID is or where to find it or what's the difference between one thing or the other or whatever. I mean, I know it seems simple, but once you start to have, more than 5 customers, the list of things that can go wrong is just quite large, and you don't want to start spending a lot of time in support. So if you build these clients, and the reason why I was thinking it would be a good idea is this. Uh, if this is a tablet working already in a restaurant where the head of the restaurant owner makes the pay plan, you can already use the tablet in order to know the geolocation, because the tablet can give it to you, and also the network characteristics to which the tablet is attached. And you don't need to bother anybody with asking this information. Okay, you can just check it. So that's very easy. Okay, so this would probably be quite important. And otherwise, for the web, you would need to build a different page with a. Actually, no, I would really also add here, you know. Okay, we would need something on the web. That's a problem. But I would really try to also get a Mac app, because I think or a Windows app for the laptop. Because I think hardware supports this as backends, and we would at least be able to get the network details, even though it may not. Yeah, no, I think it would still work. Okay. So fine. This is one piece of what we need to build. What is that we need to build otherwise? Then we need to build essentially the employee app. Okay. Um, so of course this would be it with mobile. I don't know yet whether we would be we could build it with Cordova without doing any work in Android or not. So let's look at it a moment. What do you need to do? What's the use case? You go in and you probably have to touch a button. Okay, I don't think it's enough that you walk in. I think these are not for technical reasons, but for legal reasons. That, suppose you just walk by because you forgot your bike, you don't want the employer to claim that you are actually trying to get paid extra. There may be issues there. So I think that, I'm not quite sure, but I think that for legal reasons, it would be better that the person actually has to push a button, so that there is, willing intent to initiate a paid activity. You could claim that this is something that is probably needed. Okay. Okay, so this starts it. Now, I don't know how it currently works, but I believe that you don't need to check that the mobile phone stays there for the whole time. I mean, you're not trying to use this in order to essentially prevent the employees from running away, right? Because this is a problem that we have even now, I guess. Okay? But somehow, I don't see waiters running out of restaurants or so. It's probably because you keep an eye on the, people know who's there. That would be a different problem to solve, preventing people from leaving. Is that a problem that you're thinking that you're going to solve in the app or not?
Not from work. Because even if you solve that, there's a lot of business. So let's say it's a restaurant. That employee might need to go drive somewhere, pick up some
Right.
Paper napkins to the restaurant.
Right.
Come back. So technically it's on the clock.
Right. And also, I think there is another aspect that is purely a social aspect. You want to be able to give them this app in order to make life easier, so that they can report to work and just click without bothering with that. Otherwise, it would be an app that employers love, but employees hate, because it's a sort of like a dog chain app, that gives you a shock when you walk too far. No, not quite, but that would be, some of the way in which it might be perceived. So, okay, you click on a button. I think the difficult part would be how do you detect when the employee is leaving? Now, I mean, of course, you can put another button, okay? But that is a really difficult point, because, I mean, suppose I work there. I work, I'm tired at the end, and I go home, fine. Do I always remember to check out? The answer is probably no. I mean, at least I wouldn't remember always to check out. I already lose a lot of money when I take a train because I don't tag off every time. You know, one time out of four I forget because I get something else. It's really nasty, by the way, how they ask you to pay in advance. I don't think I saw it in many other places. Anyway, so what would happen? You know, that I go home and I don't tag off. But for the reason you say, you cannot simply tag me off because I go away. Also because the network is too unreliable, right? I mean, my phone can be out of battery, so, I mean, many things could happen. So I think the tag off is the difficult part to do. How would you do it? One way would be to give a tag off button, but also give a sequence of events that could be tag offs, right? So to actually store the times in which I went away from the network. Okay, so that if I go home and I forgot to tag off, I'm presented a list pre-filled with the times at which I could actually have stopped, no? So that I don't need to try to remember at what time I left. I can simply choose one of the times in which the connection went out.
Along the same line,
Yes, yes. So very good. So I think the problem is the tag off, and it can be a notification. We can do a list and plus choose. Okay, we also give a button, of course, right? But the problem is what happens if people don't use it. Any other method? What? And any kind of verification? How does it work? I mean, I don't know how it works now. I think that in small businesses like restaurants, if you work with there as a waiter, they simply notice when you leave, and the manager keeps track of it by being there and seeing when people come and go. I don't know how it works on larger sites. Usually, I don't know. They might have a control at entrance, and they may scold you if you don't hit the time clock again, I guess. Does anybody know? Does anybody want to suggest other ways to tag off? How were you thinking of letting people tag off?
So in ours, there's a button, and then probably how we're going to end up having to ask, because obviously we can't do all the it's just if they leave the Wi-Fi network, you're fine.
Sorry?
If they leave the specified Wi-Fi area, so that they're no longer connected to the Wi-Fi network, they'll fine.
I see. Yeah, except that,
And that doesn't work in for our app.
No, but I'm not asking for your app. I'm asking if you wanted to do this for real. I mean, yeah, your app, I always understand that, you may do one solution first because it's what you can do, but so what would be better ideas from the social point of view, of letting people
So, I mean,
and the other question I have is this: should there be like a consensus mechanism? Right. So, for example, suppose I go home and at a certain time, I cannot figure out if then I can choose that I'm tagging off at 11 p.m. Does my manager is my manager also given the list of the hours at which I might have disconnected from the network and say, yeah, he disconnected at these times, but Luca says that he tagged off at 11 p.m. So that he can say, yeah, that sounds right.
how it works for most companies, the manager isn't responsible for that.
The manager is or isn't?
Usually it's,
And who's responsible?
I mean, if you obviously clock in and then for the day, and then come back later and clock out, then obviously it's supposed to go to some time. Usually if you clock in, you do your work at the place, as it is now, and then go over.
And clock out. And so what is the verification when people clock out when they clock out and they don't clock out for others? There is no...
There is.
I mean, it's just social, I guess. So that
if you forget, tell your manager so that they actually go into the system.
Right. In that case, if that's the implementation, yeah, because you know, the other question that I'm wondering is how many employers are so strict about the time? Because I would imagine that many places like restaurants say, yeah, you work over a whole day, and at some point maybe it's a Tuesday night and there are no more customers, and so it's 9:30, but you can already, you know, wrap up the day basically. So, but you still pay them as if, you know, you had customers till 10 probably, if you want to be kind to them and, you know, very good employees. I don't know. But so in that case, probably a list to choose would be the best, because if that would essentially reflect what's in place now, right? Um, and it would be given just as a help in order to be faster in selecting the tag out time. So we could say that that plus list of times would be the best, would be a solution probably. Okay. So. Okay, and so the employee has an app that contains that, and that somehow talks to the general system also, in order to be able, so that, you know, and the employee has an app that does this, and then probably has a separate screen that gives it a summary. Okay, this is probably something you want to add as well, of how many hours the employee worked and when, and etc. etc. Summary, there is a summary part, and maybe, I don't know if that, but there is also a schedule part, you know, for the future, because there is this thing that the employer fills out that this employee needs to see. So, okay, okay, so this is sort of the product design. Then there is a sort of another portion of the problem, that is, suppose you I notice at least that some of the hardest problems are the problems that are not related to building an app, but are related to making people connect to the various pieces that compose the app in the end. That is, let me give an example here. But suppose I'm an employer, okay? I own the Sheluca Italian restaurant, French-Italian restaurant. That was always my fallback plan when I was in grad school, to open a restaurant. Not a very good one, I guess. I mean, because, you know, given my abilities, yeah, my wife was always better business person, because instead of opening a normal restaurant, she's Belgian, she wanted to open a soup restaurant. You know, because soup can be very good, is healthy. And also you can make large quantities of it, and then you can sell it quickly, right? So it would be a much better business. I mean, I think you can make much more money on that than on serving tables. So the business mind is probably there. But this aside, so I opened the Sheluca restaurant, and for the record, I make some of the best pizza in the Bay Area. But it's true. I learned from the daughter of a bread maker, but she was actually also a researcher here. So she came here for complete research reasons. But she learned from her father how to make pizza in large quantities. Maybe once I should do it for the department. Sorry? Yeah, I can give it to you at the end of class. Okay. But it's to make pizza in industrial quantity, not one, you know, these fidgety amounts. Like I make 10 trays of, yeah. Anyway, so let's, so I opened this restaurant, and now I employ a person. How do you connect the person to me? So when I create a restaurant, you give me an account. Okay, I'm biased to Google engine, so, you know, let's assume it, but of course you can do it in different ways. So you go there and you click, you know, log in without needing to create an account, and I use my Gmail address. I created this restaurant, I give it a name, Sheluca, and etc. And at that point, I'm done. And now you come to work for me. How do you bind to that restaurant? Now, there is a boring way in which you have to search based on location, etc., etc., etc. I think the cute way to do that would be this, okay? That when you are here, I normally hate QR codes, but actually this would be one case in which they might be good. So I can display on my app the QR code. You can read it, and this essentially connects you to one of the places where you actually work. Okay? this would be an easy way, because you can easily create a simple identifier, and you can pass it in a foolproof way via QR code that you can just, photograph with the phone and get it. So that would probably work. Okay, would these stay together? Would these, does this make any sense from a sort of interoperability point of view? Of course, we need to put in some editing measures, such as, if my phone dies, or if my phone breaks or whatever. No, but fine. Okay, so we do that, and the employer website, we have all this kind of stuff. No, so that if things go wrong, you can tell the employer. Is this everything we need to build this? I think it might be. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So essentially, this needs to have a portal to a payroll company. So you would have to research which payroll companies are out there and what is their API and what's their protocol. Yeah, so I think there are quite a few. When I drive around Highway 101 North in San Mateo, there is always, how it is called, pay.com. No, not pay.com. Bill.com is one of them. But I think there are several others as well. So one can build a portal to that probably from this website, right? Essentially not from the app directly, but it's from the server that runs the app. You build the portal to that. Okay, so the last part is how do you make money once you build all this? What would be good ways of making money? I mean, I'm talking all the time. You should also suggest. I mean, you're suggesting a lot, of course. I mean, it's your. How would you monetize this?
You probably do best to approach either integrating your service.
So to try, okay, so this is a very good idea. Essentially, one is don't make any money, but sell yourself to a payroll company. This may be a good strategy. Another strategy that this calls is that you ask for a revenue share with a payroll company. This is actually very nice. Yeah, I think this is brilliant because it's a joke, of course, right? But my brother studied economics, and so I always, after a while, I was always for engineering, and I found it a strange idea. But after a while, I thought, well, he works directly on money. I work on other things, hoping that people will be convinced that those things are useful enough to actually give me money. It's one step more, no? And so this app has a bit of this genius element in it, that you work on money directly. So it's much easier to extract value out of it, probably. No? So that's, I mean, that's why people in finance make so much money. I mean, they're working with it. It's like asking, why a gold miner has gold. Yeah. But I have an 8 Android device at home, but it's not as good. No, jokes aside. Yeah, this sounds like a plan. Any other way to monetize? No. Yes. I mean, there are others that come to my mind, but they would be effective only after you have a big enough mass of users. Yes. Yes, yes. So essentially, yes. So the employer pays you via the payroll company. So I think that that you need to decide, because the problem there that I've seen is this, that when you start, so this is another aspect. When you start, the idea is brilliant, but what I notice in a lot of ideas, this is not of this kind, hopefully, but is what I call, you know, the desire, I don't know how to call it, but like the quantity gap. Let me explain it in this way. A lot of ideas, a huge number of ideas are done like this. You are here at zero, okay? Because you have no users, and you haven't even built the thing. This is the number of users, okay, or the popularity or something like that. Now, a lot of ideas work in this way. If you got a very large number of users, then this region is full of wonderful things that happen. You know, once your app is in wide use, you can do a lot of interesting network effect or analysis of use or etc. etc. But from here to there, there's absolutely nothing that gets you from here to there. I mean, from here to there, you simply don't have a lot to do. And this is true in two ways. One is that you don't have a lot of value, which in your case is not true. Let me give you a case in which this was true, that you don't have a lot of value in this region. One of the things that really suffered from this, but then made it, is one of the few cases that ever made it, was LinkedIn. When Ray Hoffman started it, he was included in this region. LinkedIn existed. It had basically no users. I mean, it had no users at the beginning. And LinkedIn is one of these things that are useful only if a lot of people use it. Because otherwise, you know, what are you doing there? No, if it's done to build the business connections. If there are few connections, it's not very useful. Okay? So I mean, in fact, you know, they had difficulties in starting LinkedIn. And I think many people tried to do similar things and it just never worked out. So, but I once listened to a presentation he gave, and he, you know, among other things, he gave this insight that he was incredibly well aware, and also every investor was telling him that in this region, he was basically completely uninterested in what he was doing, right? Because it was simply too small. And so he thought, okay, I might be uninteresting, but I should then be harmless. Meaning that I should try to bother you the least possible. LinkedIn, I mean, I think you are too young to know, because LinkedIn now has become too spammy as any other thing around, okay? But at the beginning, LinkedIn was this marvel. You would sign up, and it gave you modest amount of useful information. You know, I could link, because somebody invited me, so I could link to these other 5, 6, 20 people perhaps. I used it since very early on, but I was, you know, I've never been very active on it. But, you know, I was linked in to these few people. And imagine, you know, a Facebook or a Google Plus in which you're linked only to these few people. You would immediately jump out, right? I mean, there's nothing interesting to read. But that was a beautiful thing about LinkedIn. It was not useful, but it was not taking any of your time. It would never, ever send you a spam message, ever. Okay? So you basically forgot that it was there, and you never unsubscribed. Okay? You just let it there dormant. And every long while, you know, you get one more invitation or you invite somebody else. But this essentially spread like, you know, like a sort of mushroom underground for a long time until he made it. But otherwise, you know, you notice in a lot of apps, I mean, a lot of dreams of companies start in this way. You know, imagine I have this great idea, and it is a great idea. And imagine it took over, then this and that would happen, and that would happen. Except that there is no possible way in which you can make it from here to there. What made it for LinkedIn, this may be a simplified analysis, but essentially is that he had this excellent idea of keeping at least the ratio of work you have to do divided by usefulness constant, okay? So that it would not take any of your time, and also that it did not require a lot of capital there. Because a lot of these other projects that burn capital in this phase, in the end, you know, run out of capital before they can ever grow. And so that's a very important consideration. Now, your app actually is really nice in that it does not have this feedback, okay? Your utility, there is no network effect here. Your utility to a restaurant order is the same, whether he's the only one using it or whether everybody's using it. Actually, it's marginally higher if everybody's using it, because then your employees come with already the app installed on their phones, okay? But it's really is not a very big effect. The effect is there only in the case when you hire one more person and the person does not have the right type of phone and the person mumbles that they don't want to get it. If all employers use it, then that sort of, it's, but the advantage is very marginal. The other thing that this is that even if your usefulness is high immediately, the typical conversation would go as follows. No? You start your company, you contact bill.com, and you ask them for a meeting. And now, what do you guess will happen? At least I've had this experience multiple times, so I think at least I know with the 70% probability what would happen. Let's see whether any one of you guesses. So you as like a fresh person out of school, no much reputation, but you write to them and hey, I'm inventing this app and I would really like to talk to you about reselling these, etc. Using your API or etc. How do you think? What do you think would happen? What? Yeah, okay, but you might write in an email, making not all email is rejected actually, so they may get. So I don't think rejection would be the most likely outcome if you write your email well. So, but what would be the most likely outcome? None of you guesses. Should I go? Any more guesses? Yeah, both. You want to tell them about your app and that you want to use their API, but maybe that you want some business agreement so that they help you to promote you as well, right? Because if they promote you, then you promote them in turn, and so you would like to essentially talk about business development with them. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, my experience is that this is an incredibly difficult phase of negotiations, and that's because the most typical outcome is this, if you go to talk to them at an early stage with this message, that they give you the meeting. Quite possibly they give it to you. And then they're incredibly polite and ask a lot of questions. And they seem really interested and ask you some more questions. But don't sign anything and don't do anything then, but tell you that it has been very nice and that we should stay in touch and that they will think it over and whatever is nice message. The reason is that they are big and you are small, so they really don't know whether you will grow or not at that point. And it would be completely silly for them to say no to the meeting because you might grow. But it would also be completely silly for them not to use the meeting to poke your mind as much as possible. And so they use you essentially as a window into a new sort of company that may arise, and they want to learn everything possible about your business model because they may decide to do it themselves. Right? No? And so it's essentially there is a huge difficulty that I've seen related by people in Silicon Valley and experienced in first person when I, so something to that. There is a, it's not that you are not taken seriously. You are taken seriously. It's just that you being small, you're not a good enough percentage opportunity for that company yet. And instead you have an incredibly good source of information. And so that's a little bit of the problem. Okay? That they try to squeeze you for information, being as polite as possible. But then, when the moment comes to close any kind of deal, no deal is closed. And the best negotiators on the other side are the ones that keep open the conversation as long as possible to extract as much information as possible. And they always make it look like they are ready to sign some kind of deal, but the deal never gets signed. And in the meantime, they milk you for all kinds of information. Okay, so this is a real very big danger. So I think it would be, much easier to do this by starting in a way in which you use the API of the payroll company, but you actually don't talk to them very much at the beginning. Okay, the possibility for co-marketing is huge, but they will simply be very, very hesitant to take first, because they have the marketing. And one of the most incredibly valuable things is not so much the technology, but the access to the customers at this point. Okay, in a sense, this is the realization that is dawning on me as an engineer. It's sometimes much easier to build these apps than to really get traction and get them adopted. Okay, so there's an immense capital, and a good payroll company has built that capital, and they're not going to squander it on letting you into that game easily. Okay, so that's one of the problems. So using the API is great, but it would be difficult to do. To initially do otherwise. I think you need to show them that you're bringing in enough customers. But this said, this is a beautiful idea. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to do it, you should do it. Yeah. Yeah, there is this phenomenon that, there is phenomenon of scale, and this phenomenon of scale also enters in another phenomenon that I've seen that instead explains the birth of new companies. That is, especially Cisco was doing it in the Valley. They had a habit of spawning off a new startup, funding it in part, and then, buying it afterwards. And if you look at it from a macro point of view, this was folly, right? Because you had these people that already worked for you. They leave, they start a company, and then you invest in the company, but then you have to buy it. So it probably costs you, 5x or 10x what you would have paid them if they stayed your employees. So why on earth do you do this? And they did it multiple times with many companies. And I think they do it for two reasons. One is that once you're a $1 billion company, it's incredibly difficult for a small business that starts inside of the company to get traction. It's a little bit similar to this phenomenon, no? So there are these divisions that bring in billions, and then there is you who have this idea that still are bringing in zero. And then maybe if next year goes well, you may bring in 1 million, or I mean, you're 0.01%. So maybe in the company you used to be somebody who was high up, because maybe you were good. So you had visibility, you had a responsibility. Your own responsibility maybe covered a slice of products that was, one of the important products that maybe was worth $500 million in revenue per year or something like that. I don't know. I'm imagining a Cisco router line, no, whatever. And then you go out for something that is worth less than 100th of that. No, if you're inside the company, it's really hard to get resources for doing anything. If you are worth this tiny percentage of the worth of the company. And so it's much easier for you to go out and at least organize everything of the business around, yes, everything is small, but at least everything is smaller. You don't compete with the rest of the organization that is 1,000 times bigger, just in the same, for the same, it's like a mouse stealing the food of an elephant. It doesn't work well, I mean, for scale difference. And so that's why they were doing it. In addition to the motivating factor that since it's such a low product at the beginning, the prospect of getting really wealthy if this works out acts as a huge whip, to get people to work incredibly hard that probably otherwise they wouldn't inside a larger company. So I think there are these two phenomena. But I think this is a very nice app. Now there is all the marketing part that I don't know very well. Meaning that suppose even you build such a system. So there are a couple of difficult things to decide. I think the most difficult thing, and I cannot really help a lot, would be how to market. Like, what do you do? How do you get it started first? And I think, here, instead it may pay to go to somebody big. Not, because you cannot get one restaurant at a time and hope to grow. I think here it might pay off to try to get, now I don't know if Starbucks would get you. They might, but it's not Starbucks business to do this, whereas it's the payroll company to do it. So Starbucks might take you seriously. But maybe they are too large, and so you would start from something a little bit smaller. I mean, I would still maybe give it a shot to try with Starbucks. But otherwise, you could start with something a little bit smaller that can be a stepping stone to Starbucks, Walmart, or the other big ones. And I mean, Walmart will probably not get it. This is my pure guess, okay? But Walmart has a very strong technology arm, and I think they will want, they will want the data to be with them. That's just my guess. Walmart is also building a research lab in the Bay Area for data science, etc. So, my guess is that it would be hard to sell. It's too large. But others might, supermarkets, etc. The other part that extent is a sort of technology choice is this. Now you look at these, maybe this is small enough that you can build the whole of it first. Otherwise, the difficult question is, if you can't build the whole thing first, at once, what do you build first? So what is the minimum viable product, as it's called? What should be the thing you build first? This depends a little bit on whether we have money or not, meaning that, if you have money already, or if you can afford, how long can you afford working without pay before somebody invests, and so is this product aimed at users or at investors that then are supposed to give you the money to do to build the real product? Okay, so there is a little bit of difference there, but you would need to look at these and decide. Maybe this is small enough that it can be. It's difficult. I find this decision very difficult. Probably you cannot do APIs to many payroll companies for the first product. I think initially, maybe a good advice would be to pick one and stick with it. Then there is the decision, do we do both a web or a Cordoba, or do we need to do both? That's difficult. That's very difficult. I think essentially you cannot do it without the web. And then it's a matter of how incredibly painful it is not to have this part to explain to these restaurant owners that may not know anything of the particular details of the network, how to actually join the devices. I think this may be really, and so the idea would be to try to build the web and this part as similar as possible one to the other. Okay? And these also, I don't know exactly what to shave off. I mean, these notifications I would shave off. I would just build a simple tag on, tag off with a list to choose and that to start first. And so those are the other sort of choices you would do initially. Yeah, but I think that this is all implementable. So, and you would need, the usual components in my mind. That is, it's a perfect app for the usual components. So, you need a web app, because even if you build with Cordova, you need a web app, to bring in part of the information and to act, this would talk via. So, the thing I would do is that I would build the web portion and the Cordova portion on top of a common API. So I would build an API to your service. I would not build it like a traditional website. A traditional website is something like CloudGrader. CloudGrader is a traditional website in the sense that what does it do? You ask for a page that is a URL, and it gives you the page. I mean, that's how websites used to work. The way I would build this is a very different way. I would load. There will be some code that implements the app, that it lives either in Cordova statically or is given to you when you first visit the site. But then all the dynamic portion, so the page never changes. I would build it as a one-page app. The app has only one page, meaning that you never change page wherever you are. A bit like Gmail, you can write emails without going to pages. And I would talk to this API to get all the data I needed to write the page. If I did it that way, then I could essentially put a very similar code base both here and there and in the web API. And you talk to the API using Ajax, so that is JavaScript and JSON for passing data around. And this API that you build would be the same API to which also the employee works. So from the point of view of architecture, I would essentially build a server with an API that enables you to do everything you ever want to do by just calling API methods that you have implemented on the server. And then I would independently think of, developing some web code that can either be packaged into Cordova or on the web, but I would try to really keep it as simple, as similar as possible. In fact, possibly the web version would be the Cordova version, in which the sensors have a flag that say that they are not available, whatever you need there. Okay, and this app that you could also this app also will talk to that API. Now the other question mark is: does this app need to be built native Android, or can you get away with Cordova? I think it might need to be native Android, but I'm not exactly sure. The reason it might need to be native, or it may, no, in fact, okay, so this is a complicated decision. If you do Cordova, you can do all clients. And you cannot tell a waiter that comes to work for you that I'm sorry, but your iPhone is just no good and you have to have an Android device. So that's a big problem. So you probably need to cover all platforms, and the question is how. If you use Cordova, you can cover them all. But then, your phone cannot listen to this event of when the network is disconnected. At least I don't believe so, because I think, unless they have improved it, but I think that a Cordova application, if you're not running it, it does not have a long-running service attached to it that can listen to this notification and wake it back up. Am I right or wrong? Did they change it? Did they add background services and the ability to listen to these background events to Cordova, yes or no? But this would be a very important point to check. Okay? Because depending on the answer, okay? Sorry? Yes, but then and Android does not have services in the same way. iOS, sorry. So you will need to still develop for the various platforms. Maybe that's inevitable. And so I think the difficulty here would be this. I'm sure that as first thing you would like to make something that works on all phones, because unlike some other app, so this app is easy in some respects, but has this difficulty that you have to be able to accommodate most waiters. You cannot tell an owner to please employ only people that have an Android. So you need to cover, and so at the beginning you would do it with Cordova, but if you could do it with Cordova to be fast, because you have little resources, then once you get capital, you can hire people, or there are incredibly nice developer groups. Well, maybe I shouldn't tell you. Maybe you will throw tomatoes at me because they are in the position of the people looking for jobs. But there are great people who develop for Android and iOS in other countries. Actually, this is one of the mixed things about capitalism, right? I think you're reading these articles that the middle class in America is doing worse than to be compared to the rest of the world, right? The Canadian median income is above the US one for the first time, and we are doing worse, etc., which is true, or which I believe is true, because I can only read the statistics you read. But the other great aspect of it is that people that once were living in much worse conditions, now they can actually do much better. So I mean, of course, you lift some parts of the world, and then some others are less proeminent. But there are these developer shops in many other countries that were an absolutely wonderful job. And so you could use some of their work actually to help you develop some of these versions as well, because getting good Android developers in the Bay is difficult. So you are one of those now. Could be. But so yeah, the problem would be how to simplify these in Cordova. So can you? But then you are completely button based. Is that a good enough product? Do you think and it depends. If you want to go to users first, maybe you use Cordova. If you want to go to investors, maybe you can do a really polished Android prototype, and then you can tell them that once they give you money, you will develop the iOS one. And this may be one of the difficult choices, how to cut it down so that we can make it to the next stage of getting funding, I guess. Yeah, and that would work. That would work somewhat, right? That's exactly the API I was thinking about for iOS, actually. But yeah, but yes, you could do it via that. It would not be perfect, but it would tell you when you are getting in and out of the location. And then it would be okay, because you would have an Android version that is more powerful and iOS version which is less. But then, the employees with the iOS have to click, and the ones who are, I mean, would be fine. But which one do you build first, essentially? I don't know. How would you do it? What would you build first?
Well, if you could get this so that they were like similar enough, you could maybe write it so that everything was plugging in, and iOS's version is plugging in uses the geofencing version running service that's by CMPS.
So you would do it essentially based on Cordova with a plugin that you write custom for Cordova. You probably would. Now, a bit of information. So, I mean, I only have two criticisms. So, I mean, that's a very good approach. The two, what would be the drawbacks of it? One possible drawback is that building a plugin to run the right service in Android, in Cordova, and then building in Cordova on top of it may require a lot more work than just building the thing in Android native and that's it. So there is some work multiplication. Maybe it's not a major factor. The other thing that I always wonder is this. What is the business risk of building on top of Cordova? You may tell me zero because we are already doing it here. And we just need to have 1 year of runway, and then who cares? Because then we are either dead or we are big enough that we can build for more specialized platforms. So that's a perfectly good reason. Maybe not 1 year, but 2 years, right? So you don't need Cordova to exist forever. You depend on it for 2 years. But in the long run, Android is gonna stay, iOS is gonna stay. Well, not forever, no, but at least for the next 10 years, it's very reasonable to believe that they will stay even more. No, but Cordova is less certain, in my opinion, right? How is the Mozilla Foundation doing? Will they be bought? Will they stay? What will happen? Will they I mean, I just don't know. Okay. I mean, most of the income of the Mozilla Foundation, if you look at it, comes from, where does it come from? From Google. Google pays 80% of the money going into the Mozilla Foundation in exchange for featuring Google as the browser as a search engine on Mozilla. I mean, I'm not sure about the reasons, okay, but I know about the 80% figure. But Google is also developing Chrome. But Google also likes to have this open source ecosystem around it. So, but Google is also developing the Chromebook. So you see, it's a complicated relationship there, but probably you can count on it for 2 years, not to unravel, and to be able to use Cordova for a couple of years. But there is this business risk always, whenever you pick a platform. So that would be the other drawback. But I think you're right. I think that could be an appealing proposition.
Might be the case that since so much is
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. It's a difficult choice because it could be that this summary and schedule, this maybe can be done quickly. Because if you cannot do those, you can always do web views in iOS or Android that are not that big, some reasonably big schedule. Because this is, I mean, I'm showing you some information. It's not so complicated after all. Yeah, I agree. So it's difficult. I don't know. Anybody has opinions on?
I feel like it kind of depends on like you're well connected into like a couple of small companies. You're fine just getting something out there that's cross platform, and you can get them moving and say you're able to get it quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's small companies, but the connection is fine. If on the other hand you have no connection with any company, product, and you're just looking for investors, that's and again either way might work, but that's one possibly I feel like the skill in our community will all Android version, but one
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
presenting like if I have money, I can create it.
Yeah, you're probably right in the sense that there is a danger that if you build some map here using Cordova on a generic platform, you look half baked. And when you go there, looking for investment because you want to grow, they say, there are these people that have this product, but it really doesn't look at the level of the other successful companies. It looks, clunky. I don't know how, not so polished. And so you may have difficulties in that sense. But I agree also with you that if you could be sure that there is actual traction, um, I think it would be essential to do some wireframes, so some map of this app and decide exactly how it has to look like, if it's simple enough. Another thing that to do would be that I think this portion of the app needs to have a really well done UI. And I'm sorry that I cannot teach you how to. I wanted to invite a lecturer that is, I mean, a lecturer, a person I know who designs UIs. He does not do any code. It's simply the artsy part. He knows how to produce, buttons that look like buttons or art that looks like, and it's very non-trivial. But you will need a good injection of that in this portion to look great, essentially. Um, yeah, I think your point of view is right. I still think that it would be important to be able to talk someone into using it. Now, the beauty of talking someone into using it is that you can do it in really small scale, and these people don't really lose a lot if they do it. I think the real point of friction to get somebody to use it would be that would be on this end then, because you have to convince the business owner. And so the difficult thing to do would be to, why wouldn't I use you? Because yes, you give me the right information, but then I get these crappy spreadsheets, and it's too much work to actually make sense of them and pay the people. Okay, I think this may be the biggest friction point. No, because if you give me the times to the minute and etc., I don't know what to do with that. Maybe the people just want to know, rounded up to the hour or in some reasonable way, so that they can know how many hours and they can. Because at the beginning, if you don't have these already built, I may just want to know that Georgia did 17 hours, Anne did 25, and something like that, so that they can write the check at the end of the week. So I think the biggest friction point would be this, because I think it's very reasonable to be able to talk into some small restaurant owner into doing that, if it doesn't become a burden for them to interpret the data you give out.
I think one of the nice things about this too is if eventually the alright, keep your system here. Let's start doing this too. Because this is like you don't have to run a whole system on at the
Right.
or whatever. It's just a mobile app.
No, right. No. Yeah, you can easily do both, but the problem is that the system they're running on their computer has likely been optimized to to be easy to use and doing the right functionality. And you don't know what the right functionality is yet when you start. And so you need to put some work in being quite simple, because yes, otherwise, yeah, yeah.
I've actually worked with a lot of payroll.
I see.
It's pretty expensive without.
Yeah, I mean,
not.
I think here at UCSC I've seen some of the best examples of disastrous design. I don't know if I don't think you saw my emails, because I think there were to a faculty mailing list that you didn't see, but the faculty have a main page in which they log in to give you grades and to do everything possible, and it looks like this. Did I already draw it for you? It looks like this. So there's a big web page, okay? There is, the slug, the happy slug, and etc. And then there is a very thin mail bar, and then it's full of all the possible means, like what to do if a student loses a shoe. No, not quite, but all these kind of situations that are very rare and that you need to know about, how to get it. And then here there is actually a space, okay, in which there is only a big arrow that says click there to start. And here there is a very small thing that says me. Okay? So practically for everything useful that you ever land here, you need to click there. Only once I click there can I actually see, the list of classes I have. Everything else is hidden behind that. And since nobody was, I guess that at the beginning everybody was clicking there and everybody was staring, trying to figure out. And so they had to put this huge arrow. But everything is built in such a way that every one of these things here that is full of stuff is a container. So from the point of view of software engineering, you can rearrange your containers on this completely useless screen as much as you want. But they have to put the start menu there. So this is one of the system, and this was built, I guess, on top of one of these vendor systems. And the other beautiful system that implements accounting that I've seen at UCSC is cross-buy, which is the system that I should use in order to buy things that are over $1,000 for a laptop. Luckily, I don't do that often right now because it's a disaster, the amount of time I lose. But one of the incredibly beautiful UI features is that once you go through a huge pain and you put together an order and somebody puts it in for you because you are not authorized to do it yourself or whatever, then you need to approve an order. So you say, see, this long thing, and then there is an order number, and you click to approve it. What happens? That it gets approved. And since you have already approved it, it's never ever shown to you again. So if you needed to email something, somebody, for example, asking, this order I approved last month, has it come in by any chance? You don't even know the order number anymore. There is no trace left in the system for you. Anyway, fine. So yeah, I think a lot of these accounting systems are easy. So last part, and this I'm a fairly partial expert, okay? But since this is the end, it's sort of a problem material. So how do you build a company in practice? Well, there are, in practice, a couple of ways of incorporating a company, but there is a main one. The non-main one is that if you just want a company to protect yourself from liability, you can incorporate a California LLC, which is very easy to do, it's very fast, but it's not an instrument in which people will feel eager to invest. For example, ProGrader, as you can see, if you search for it, is a California LLC. Because I just did it in order so that I can separate essentially the money I spend on ProGrader to keep it running, which is next to zero, but still, from my own personal money in case somebody sues me. Okay, fine. So California LLCs are very easy to incorporate, and there is whatever plumber, carpenter, etc. they might incorporate. Not just to give them a way to separate the business finances from your own, essentially. If you want to really develop a company in which other people invest in practice, the preferred instrument is Delaware corporations. Delaware, because in Delaware there are specific laws that make it easy to incorporate and also give protection to investors, and I'm not an expert on these protections. And in practice there are two types of Delaware corporations with shares. So there is S Corp and C Corp. The difference is that the S Corp, if you are a US citizen or permanent resident, is more convenient because while the company is small, you can deduct the expenses from your own personal taxes. The drawback is that all the shareholders have to be US citizens or permanent residents. So you cannot have people abroad. Which, I mean, in some cases it might happen, you know, that somebody that joins you is not a permanent resident. But you can convert from one to the other under some rules. The bigger question of advice is, you know, when to incorporate, and I can give it to you because once, you know, when I came out from Google before coming back to UCSC, I was going with the idea of starting a business, and in the end, you know, I sort of folded it. But so one lesson that I learned that was confirmed to me by many is that it does not pay to incorporate too soon. It's better to incorporate when you receive the first angel money or round of investment. The reason being that incorporating is expensive. Whatever you do, it ends up being a few $1,000s. And not only that, but also a waste of time, whereas, you know, you don't want to waste that time immediately. And the other reason is that you think, well, if I incorporate, I own 100%. So when you incorporate, you may decide that you create a company with, I don't know, 10 million shares. Of these, you issue, I don't know, 4 million. And of these, and you know, at the beginning, they've all issued it to you because you're the sole founder. And so you think, okay, this is great, and now I own 100% of the company. And when I get to the first round of investments of angel money, you know, I will issue more shares to these people to give me the money, and so my ownership will be diluted, but I still own the whole of it. Because, you know, the company is already started and already owned it. This is true in theory, but it's often not true in practice. So what often happens in practice is that when the people invest in you, they say something like, this is great, okay, this is the part for you, this is the part for us, but of the part for you, from now, because we give you the money now, you are vested one-fourth of it, say. So one-fourth of it is really yours and vested already. And the remaining 3/4, I mean, this is all negotiable, okay, and so can depend. But the remaining 3/4 will vest over 4 years, or over, usually over 4 years, 25% a year, something like that. This might be the pact that is actually made. And so you see, it does not necessarily pay to have built all these first before you have the first investment, because you have spent, you know, maybe $5,000 in all these kind of expenses, and then you still have to essentially redo the share ownership once you get to the first round of funding to go for it, right? So my temptation is now, or the advice I heard, and you know, I bungled it in a major way, but the advice I heard is always to incorporate when you truly need it. Okay. The only thing I don't know for this particular app, but this, you know, I'm talking to you in general. For this particular app, I don't know if you, for liability reasons, need to incorporate earlier, but I don't think so. And even if you did, it would be almost worth it to incorporate it, you know, just as something really lightweight, like a California LLC that is very easy. You know, how much does it cost to keep your company up and running? A California LLC is $800 a year. A C Corp, once you start it, which may be $4,000, you need to pay every year. The minimum is $800 to California, $400 to Delaware, or $350 to Delaware, and probably around $500 to a tax accountant that can do you the taxes of a corporation of that type. So it's probably $1,500 per year, which is, you know, not very much if you have people that work, I mean, if it's a real company. But it's a lot of money out of the window if it's not yet a real company, I guess, right? You start writing all these checks for no result. You could take those $5,000 and give them to a designer who builds like a very, very beautiful UI, I guess. So, you know, and then, you know, once I think, you know, the advice is always get money as late as possible if you're confident you will get it. because the later you get it, the better the deal will be on the company ownership once they give you the money. Okay, and then once you get the money, unfortunately, you get on a cycle. Before, I mean, if you were independently wealthy, you would be on your own clock. The trouble of getting money is that you start to be on other people's clock. Once they give you money, you need to use it. So you need to hire some people to help you develop a company. And once you do that, then, after a while, the money runs out. And so you need to figure out what to do then. You need to raise another round of funding before the money goes out, or else sell the company, or else turn it profitable. Okay, but before a company is profitable, you may need to have 5 years. Some are not profitable after 5 years, but and so you need to wonder, what will happen to me? No, at the beginning you're at zero with your own money. Then you go up because they invest, and then you go slowly down, and you need to, have a sufficient number of these after which either the company becomes something you can actually sell, or starts making money. And so, I mean, this idea, for instance, has a lot going for it, because if you can execute properly, you would not necessarily need a lot of people to keep it up and running. Even if you expand it, you don't need to expand the number of people all that much. You can do it as a reasonably small company. There are others, like a Groupon, that immediately needed to have a lot more people working in sales, because they needed to acquire one customer at a time. So they had to expand the sales force a lot. I mean, they're hard to keep running on a small scale. Yeah. Okay. I mean, this was a nice case study. We can give advice for other apps, but I think it's late. So, are there any questions on any of these aspects, or would you like to comment? Okay.
We're going to have a service connect, and we're basically using the exact code from 1.3.
Yes, sir.
But it's not connected. Basically, we're calling the connection things, but then the service isn't getting it. We're not getting the volume service that was happening. It's saying, trying to connect, it's calling it, and then and then you have one service connected call, and then service connected. That never connects. So there may be like a list of reasons
I mean, there is an extra stupid reason, but it's an error I made once. I forgot to declare the service in the manifest.
That's it.
Okay. And I know only because I did it. I was scratching the head and saying, now what? And it's because if you don't declare it, it doesn't know it exists, and so it tries to bind. Yeah. Well, that was a good question. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I wish there was something to change the way computer science works in such a way. I find it so incredibly vulnerable to these things that come from off left field, right? I mean, you really don't. They're not in your vision, and then they come. I wonder if this is common to other professions, really. If you're a plumber, well, I think also probably. You're trying to run a pipe, and then you find this concrete column where you actually wanted the pipe to go, and now you're stuck, and but I don't know.
I think every profession where you think at all, unless you're literally at like a assembly line doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, but the difference. I mean, I had some home renovation, and so I could see these people thinking, and doing, and then the bug would happen that they try to put a pipe there, and but these people make it seem as if it's value added the thought they do in order to reroute the pipe. Whereas instead we are in this situation where we are simply there scratching your head and the product is not there. So I think we have some image perception. Anyway. What you say, maybe? Yeah, one general advice is that I see few people using Git. Raise your hand if you're using Git for your project. Okay, so people here are using them. I can tell you that Git is truly important, especially when they're developing for Android. Recently, I mean, it's important not to lose your work, but recently I was saved because I had the most incomprehensible bug of all. And the only way I found it is that I knew that it was introduced at some point, because before the thing used to work. And so what I had to do is do dichotomic search and try to find the first version at which I brought it. Okay? And then I had to look at the difference. And I can tell you that the difference was a completely tangential thing. Essentially, it's some kind of bug in the garbage collector, okay, that causes. So there is no logical relationship between the change I made and the fact that the application would silently die at some point. And had I not been able to you know, keep track of my application and see the first time where this behavior changed, I would never be able to pull myself out of it. So my recommendation cannot be stronger for using Git. It's not only not to save your code, it's to essentially know when you break. It's the only way to figure out, you know, some of the difficult problems. So when you break something, to pinpoint to the place where you've broken it. So, and another thing that I just give you as parting consideration about this class, and this is really a huge thing of which I would be very interested on your opinion. You know, before I started teaching Android and web, I used to teach other kind of things, but I used to be a theoretician in computer science. I would do work on game theory and automata theory and formal methods, hardware verification, logic, this kind of stuff. And now I teach Android. What goes always in the back of my mind is this. I was reading a completely ridiculous article on the New York Times on Harvard, you know, that they take it for being one of the best universities, and they probably are in general. But they look at this kind of technical teaching, such as computer science, as something that is, you know, belongs more to trade schools than at the real liberal arts college that gives you a broader education. I never had that point of view because I myself came from an engineering school where they taught me how to, you know, design circuits and do real, you know, real stuff. But so my doubt is always this: how valuable is it that I teach Android? In the sense of when I teach mathematics, these are things that are, you know, eternally true and they last a long time. When I teach Android, it's closer to the boundary of practice. Some things, in fact, I really don't know how to teach. I mean, I try to do a good job. I don't know how good. But for example, you know, I need to teach you some API. For example, why didn't I teach the API for using Google Maps? Well, because, you know, I can show you how to use it, but it's not a highly conceptual thing. You put it together and you use it. And so there is this sort of dichotomy between the principles, you know, like, you know, these beautiful classes of theory of algorithms that are taught, you know, here at Santa Cruz. No, I highly recommend them. And then some very practical. And where is the border between something that ought to be taught in a university and something that really belongs, as Harvard would put it, in a trade school? And which things are of general value? And, you know, my comeback to the people that claim that courses such as Android belong to trade schools but not real universities is that I think they're looking at the world with an incredibly snob attitude. Because if you look at how we live today, you know, and the information that is available to us and how we can evolve intellectually, this is due in large measure to a lot of scientific advance that actually was done by engineers designing products, you know, that designed the internet, that designed the web, designed all the applications around it, designed all the data centers that power it. And so I don't look down on actually, you know, teaching the engineering portion of it and the nuts and bolts, right? Because I think that otherwise, if you have this detached intellectual, you might have, you know, a great liberal arts vision, but you lack the ability to actually change the world by, every one of us changes it by a tiny amount, but you lose the ability of changing it in the right direction, right? Because you don't know how to make it happen. And so I have this huge quandary in my mind on how worth it is to teach things that are not highly conceptual. Let's put it that way. So, would you have liked to show to you more code? Would you have liked me to show you less code and devote more time to the high principles of Android programming if I knew what they are? I mean, sometimes I know, but I don't always know. I don't know what's the high principle of using the Google Maps API. I mean, there may be some, but I don't know. Okay, so do you have any comment? Not on my class, but I would say more in general on the kind of courses that you would like at this university. I'm just curious.
We have a lot of classes now that are, we do plenty of conceptual philosophy. Um, when I took 183 in the fall, it was very different because it was very much the life. So when I took Android, it wasn't so much that I loved the idea of any mobile too. That's the thing now. But like, I like the idea of actually do the class. The idea of a lot of that. I like the more immediate community. Maybe it was more like that as a junior and senior than it was as a freshman and sophomore. But as I started learning more and more theory, I started getting different lessons.
So you would not, because my counterpoint is that you are not thinking of, hey, it's pointless that you tell me about this practical stuff. I can read it up the web. It's just the same.
I can read theory on the web. I mean, I can teach myself math on the web. You teach yourself anything on the web.
I see.
Well, I mean, I can buy a calculus textbook and read it, and read the normal concepts. I mean, you say maybe one is more than the other, but at some point you teach yourself a lot of things.
I see. No, because to be frank with you, to me, the value added compared to the reading it on the web of 183 and 121, and I'm not claiming I do it well, okay? In fact, I'm the person, I have two problems as a teacher. One is that the more I know something, the more I summarize it in my mind. My great ability is to make a synthesis. And so I always have the impression I know nothing as a consequence. Because, once you summarize it, it becomes small. But the other problem is that I always think that I'm doing a really poor job, and this may be true, in fact, but I don't know. But I think the one value added is that I show you how various pieces fit together. In a sense, it would be better in the combination 121 and 183, because you don't do pure Android. I see a lot of other places that teach pure Android, and that's it. So that's why I tried to show you more on the interaction on the server, for instance, and the complete system design. I think that might be the value added of these. But otherwise, I'm really thinking sometimes, what's the value added of showing you such practical information? I don't know. In math, there is more, right? Because you can go over a technique of proof by induction or a theorem on automata, and I might have some insight I had when I used to do these things, that, people, for example, when they write about automata theory and mathematical logic, they write to be precise. They don't write to be intuitive, generally. The Russians had this great tradition of mathematics that was quite intuitive in the way they wrote it. But so, as a teacher, you can essentially extricate from the precision and give the intuition. But in these APIs, what's the intuition behind? I mean, sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't.
I mean, for sure, I need something very familiar with class. I need some rectify going into 183. And after coming out of this class and that class, I knew more about them. I was opened up to more things, and more ways to do things, more ways to web services, and all these things. Like, I knew more about the subject, more about the theory of actually than I would have better gotten.
I mean, what do the others think? Should we teach more? I mean, I don't want this to be about my class. It's really not about my class, but I'm always thinking, generally among what we teach in CS, should we move in which direction? Does it make sense that we introduce, I was chatting with Liz Getour the other day about introducing some kind of class at the beginning that would teach you the basics of Git databases, just to get you started with some infrastructure, shared commonly, but this will be very practical, no? And so I was talking to her, and I was saying, yes, I think it would be a great idea, but where is the boundary between theory and practice? And I was grappling with it, and I didn't know exactly what to answer. And so,
why can't I put out here how much period? I can't do that. Like, the whole point of us paying thousands of dollars is so that we could get rid of the world. Excluding barriers, excluding a packages, screws up only your failure. So we should have an equal amount of profits to offer.
Okay, that's a good point of view.
Yeah, definitely. I think the way that the curriculum is structured here made it seem like a lot of the first classes you take are more theoretical, and then once you have that good theory basis, you're taking more about the practical interventions. I think one of the huge benefits of having the practical side of it is have real projects that you put on a resume and your applicants so that we have. Like, I mean, I'm applying for internships right now. I'm putting this Android problem that we're doing on my resume. Definitely a lot of things I'm looking for. They're looking for people who have this Android.
I see. I see. I see. Okay.
One thing I think about there's only 4 choices we get to make. Really, I mean, maybe other people have done that a lot more time than me, but maybe this is for advantage soon. So I'm really, it's like I get my 4 electives, and then everything else is exactly there for muscles. And I realize a lot of it is definitely required, but some of it doesn't seem like it's.
I mean, you know, at some point we want to revise the curriculum, I can tell you. We had some discussions this year, but we haven't done it. There were a lot of things that used to be fundamental, but are slightly less now. And
Yeah, I feel like some classes like Tyler probably could be overlapping. It's a good class, but that's something.
I mean, I probably agree with you because nowadays, you know, I say that I think I wrote 6 compilers myself, not for programming languages, but for languages. You know, I mean, you don't only write compiler for a programming language; you write it also for a formal language. I was doing it.
Right, but I mean, I'm saying it's not useless, but it's just
right.
useful as, for example.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree.
It's a very specific.
Anyway, yeah, I'm very interested about this feedback because you know, being a theoretician that now teaches this kind of things, I really wonder about
I mean,
the level.
There's people who think we need more theory, we need more practice, we need balance. And I feel like if we have more options of electives, who's going to decide themselves what they need?
I see. I see. Yeah, that's a good point.
And so people who want more theory, like, and then, you know, people
Bye. I stopped the